Hello, my name is Sebastian Thwan, and I have the great pleasure and privilege to be with Zayd Enam, the CEO of Cresta. Hi, Zayd.
Hi, Sebastian.
Cresta is a company that brings AI into corporations for things like sales chats and customer services. Zayd, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've built a platform that learns from the very best of every conversation and is able to then coach people in real time, both the agents and the customers, to ultimately deliver the most effective conversation to each customer. And so our goal is to ultimately help every representative of a company to be the very best representative of the company by coaching them in real time based on what is the most effective conversation to have to ultimately drive the business outcome.
And Cresta is an artificial intelligence company. Why is this artificial intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, we started at the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab, the project, and we built some of the leading NLP and artificial intelligence technology to power the platform.
And people, when they hear artificial intelligence, they think job replacement. They think you want to replace people. When you learn how to converse with a customer through Cresta, why are you not replacing people?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that's a common view and maybe perhaps a lazy view of artificial intelligence. I would say that there's a very lazy view that artificial intelligence basically can do anything a human can do, but automate it. But I think the very exciting applications of artificial intelligence are combining both humans and machines in new creative ways to unlock capabilities that we've never even imagined before. So if you look at, say, the advances that we made in terms of phones and computers, they haven't been sort of figuring out what we've done as humans and sort of automating them. We've sort of figured out how to use those fundamental technologies as building blocks to unlock and enable entirely new applications and new sort of perspectives that weren't even possible before. And so that's really what we're hoping, and what our perspective is with artificial intelligence is not really going for the lazy way, which is like sort of figuring out what can we automate of an existing process, but how can we create new processes and new combinations of humans and machines that are entirely able to build upon these building blocks and create entirely new value and new sort of advantages for us as humans and as companies.
That's exciting. Walk me through your customer journey. Who is your customer? How do you get on board? What do you do for those customers? What's the response of the people involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really took an early sort of goal to focus on serving on enterprise, and the reason is because what we found is for large enterprises, there's a very big sort of operation, customer facing operation, often in the contact center, and that's really where we focused initially because we found that there's so much pain and opportunity in the contact center. Um, and so what we've done is we built that technology, an enterprise grade platform to serve the enterprise. And what we are able to do is identify a specific use case. And so that use case might be a sales use case or a care use case or a retention use case where the contact center is having conversations with their customer and are looking to sort of ultimately either drive a sales conversion, resolve a customer issue with better customer satisfaction in a very efficient way, or ultimately prevent a customer from canceling or churning. And so what we're able to do is build a model, build an artificial intelligence on a platform that can then learn from the conversations of the very best representatives for that use case and then deploy that so that every agent, every representative is getting real-time coaching, real-time assistance live on a conversation to help them perform and act as the very best. And so the results have been tremendous. We've served Fortune 500 enterprises like Intuit, Cox Communications, Porsche, and large enterprises that have served these needs. And what we've been able to do is find these specific use cases, land, and then the most interesting and most inspiring thing for me personally is that the businesses not only find value in terms of the business outcome, but the people that use the software, they actually love it. And not only do they love it, they love their career even more for it. So they're using the application. And so the results, we do a study and we do a survey at the end of each deployment where we ask, how does Cresta impact your love for your career? And the data that we get is that 90% of customers who use Cresta, their love for their career actually increases. And it actually increases for two reasons. One is that they now have technology to basically help automate the menial, tedious tasks that they were usually doing. So automating the basic form filling applications or automating these kinds of things that they don't really want to be spending their time doing. That's a very boring part of their job. But then secondly, they also now have the confidence to answer customer inquiries and sort of have a customer conversation by getting that knowledge that makes them feel that they're ready and primed to be successful on the role. So the company is really investing in them and helping giving them the tools to be successful in the role. And when you feel that kind of support and that kind of confidence in being able to interact with a customer, that ultimately makes you happier in your job and makes you sort of more primed to succeed. And so that's really the impact that we've been seeing, which is personally very inspiring for me.
That's interesting because normally AI is associated with job replacement, but what you are telling us is you're leveraging AI to make your customers' agents stronger and making them love the job more and stay in the job longer. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so and then the retention, and so we mentioned exactly, you see this impact on retention of the representatives as well. Where in this industry, it's very common for people to leave a job after a year, and the churn in one call center is about 33%. That's the industry average churn. But what we found already, and this is anecdotal, and we're doing these studies right now, is that we find when people are more successful, when they have the tools to be successful, they stay at the job longer. So you're staying for longer than a year, you're staying for multiple years because the company is really invested in your success.
I want to change gears a little bit and ask questions. What is in there for the world? Like, what are you learning about artificial intelligence that surprises you, and what should we think about AI as a result?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I think a lot of sort of things that we've found or we've learned about artificial intelligence and its applications in the world over the last 10 years have been very surprising. I think one of the biggest ones is that often sort of it's really hard to build in these kinds of really high sort of situation or sort of high risk situations to build fully autonomous, highly accurate artificial intelligence to really serve the need in a fully autonomous way. And so that's really where augmentation and sort of the right mix of humans and machines can have a really big impact and make things possible. And so we've seen this in terms of both tools that help sort of doctors, drivers, in our case, representatives be more effective because the technology as artificial intelligence, while it is made significant progress in terms of all the work in NLP and computer vision, we're still not at the level of human level intelligence or general sort of reasoning. And so that's really why we need to be able to combine that technology with humans and really make the best of both to sort of solve these really high impact use cases across many different industries.
There's a lot of people that warn of artificial intelligence as enslaving us. Like Elon Musk says they're going to eat us like chicken sandwiches. Stephen Hawking talked about Bill Gates and so many others. Are those people right? Is it a matter of time until we get there, or do you think they're wrong?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of sort of media sort of frenzy around that kind of direction. I think Elon Musk and sort of folks like that are very intelligent. There's a lot of very intelligent folks that have had very sort of grandiose statements about sort of the enslavement of what artificial intelligence is going to be. I think fundamentally, artificial intelligence as a technology is just like any other. So just like how the phone has made it possible for us to be superhuman, or a computer has made it possible for us to be superhuman in many ways and be able to use that technology to help us do better, artificial intelligence is just much like that. It's technology that's still, in some cases, in its infancy. It's already shown dramatic impact, but there's still a lot of potential for it. And it'll be a technology that we'll learn to, as humans, shape and build to our needs to ultimately serve us effectively. I think the hyperbole around it is sort of disservice in a few ways. One is because I think it causes a lot of fear in the public and in terms of governments and all these things, which I think that fear right now is not currently sort of what I would say is like well reasoned. And I think there's an opportunity to build artificial intelligence in a safe manner, in a manner that serves humans. And I think that's really what we want to focus on, is that how do we build this technology, just like we built the computer and the phone, to serve us and to help make us more effective and make us more productive. And I think that's really the opportunity for us to focus on is that I think there is a big impact, and a few where maybe to discuss is like, how does artificial intelligence impact economic inequality, or how does it impact sort of war and sort of manufacturing of goods in war? But I think the sort of hyperbole around sort of enslaving us is a little bit sort of going far ahead.
Let's talk about this a little bit more. One of the doomsday scenarios that comes in creeping in here is this idea that AI can take over the repetitive part of your work, the stuff that you do in and out. Like if you are, say, an accountant, or if you are a taxi driver, and you kind of do the same thing in and out, even medical doctor and diagnostics. What should people think that go to work and say, I pride myself of being really, really good and doing the same thing over and over and over again?
Yeah, I think that's going to change. I think there is. I think in general, a sort of a big opportunity for a shift in the way people view their value and their sort of impact on the world, in the sense that I think we all need to adopt to have a very strong learning mindset. I think the world is going to dramatically change, and it's only accelerating because of the rate of technological progress. If you look at the technological progress in the last 100 years versus the last 1,000 years, we've been exponentially accelerating in terms of what's been possible with technology. And so, in an environment like that, it's dramatically different in terms of what the expectations are. And I think just the mindset that we need as humans and as people is a very different mindset. We need a learning mindset that always recognizes that the world is going to just be different in 5 years, it's going to be different in 10 years. And we want to sort of have that ability to grow, to upskill ourselves, to learn new things and learn new skills to sort of keep up with that. And it's just a very different value system, I think, than what was what we had a few hundred years ago.
Zayd, you are one of the leading technologists in artificial intelligence. You're running a thriving company in that space that has really getting great business traction. But stepping a bit aside, what's your advice for CEOs? Like, if you're a CEO or a business leader, a C-suite executive listening to this, what should you take away from it? What should you do?
I think at the end of the day, everything in business, everything starts from the customer. And it always comes back to what can you deliver for the customer? What is the experience? What is the business outcome? What can you do for your customer? And then walking back from there in terms of what is the product, what is the technology that you want to sort of leverage to be able to deliver something better for your customer, a better product, a better experience, a better process. And so I think that's always where we need to start and where we need to think about. And so I think if we do that and we view this artificial intelligence under that lens, then what we want to do is go back and look at every part of our product experiences, whether our product is a car or a software, or if it's a process and consulting service. And we want to identify what is the job that the customer is looking for us to help complete. So is a customer looking to sort of get from point A to point B? Are they buying a software to sort of get to a business outcome? Are they consulting with us to get advice? And that job, how can we leverage technology to help them get that job done? I think the really interesting thing about artificial intelligence is it unlocks this massive new set of capabilities that make it easier to close a gap between what is the job the customer is looking to get done and what's possible with the technology and the product. And I think if we focus through that lens of what are new capabilities that are possible with our product that can make ultimately the job the customer wants to get done more effective, more efficient, cheaper, better, then I think that's really the sort of alignment in the vision. I think a CEO that can most effectively deliver to their company and to their customers, I think that's the place to start.
We're obviously just in the middle of a horrendous pandemic, and we see unemployment rates at levels never before. We see a lot of people in the hospitality industry massively disrupted, in transportation and others. But it's also an accelerant. So if you are a CEO of a company that is not very technology focused, and you hear about this thing, artificial intelligence, what is a practical way to get involved, to get on the bandwagon and be on top of this?
Yeah, I actually think there's a really interesting opportunity here because if you look at certain places, for example, you look at India as an example. India and some places like Pakistan, the country I'm from, they sort of, if you look in the last 10 years, they adopted mobile phones at a much, much faster pace than anything that the United States did. And the reason that happened is that they leapfrogged the whole sort of the whole wireline phone and the whole broadband phone. And they sort of had that, there was a fundamental change in wireless technology. Those countries were able to adopt that, leapfrog that entire sort of wired infrastructure, and at a much faster pace, adopt that technology, much cheaper service to deliver to the customers. I think there's a similar opportunity here. And the opportunity is that there's been a fundamental change in technology that makes a whole new set of capabilities possible. And I think that technology allows even companies that were behind in the last 5 years to leapfrog their competitors by adopting that technology and realizing how it can change their fundamental process, their fundamental product, and deliver ultimately a very better experience for their customers. And so I think that's really the opportunity here is to completely go back, go to stage one, recognize that there's been a disruptive change in technology, and examine it. How would you reevaluate if you were to build a company and build a product from ground up, leveraging the latest technology that you have available to you now? How would you reinvent everything from scratch? And then use that as a starting point to then go back and figure out how to take your company from where you are right now to the future.
That's really a radical statement, but I've myself seen it happening. The one thing comes to mind is Randall Stephenson when he took over AT&T and turned AT&T from a landline into a mobile company. It was just brilliant. And I think it was exactly what you said, Zed, where someone sat down and said, what should our business in the future be? And let's just build that business. That's very, very hard to do. I have one last question for you, Zed. You're now on stage as a world-recognized leader in artificial intelligence. You built one of the most thriving startup companies in that space. But it's not too long ago that you were a student enrolling at Stanford University, trying to figure out what to do with your life. And now that you're a little bit older, tell us, what advice do you give to young people who are entering the world, maybe not even technologists like yourself, but maybe humanities people or social science people that want to do a good thing for the world in the future? What should they do? What should they know about? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two pieces of advice, Sebastian, as my mentor that you've had that had the biggest impact on my life personally. I think the first piece of advice, I think early on in our project, you gave me the advice that we were working on this technology. We were sort of figuring out where will artificial intelligence have the biggest impact in the world. And you told me that basically what you need to do is you need to go to your proverbial desert. Because you told me that when you built a self-driving car, that you started with basically going to the real world, figuring out how to build a car that works. And then once you made that technology, made that advancement, then you came back to the lab and figured out what was the advancement, that the scientific advancement that was made. And I think that approach of going out into the world and figuring out how to build technology, so we as scientists and innovators aren't just stuck in our academic labs and isolated from the world, that we're actually out in the world and sort of figuring out how to leverage our technology and make it impactful and useful for the world, and then coming back and figuring out what is the advancement. I think that's always been a piece of advice that's really stuck with me for a very long period of time. And that's been key. And then the second piece, I think, for me personally, is that one thing was, you're right in the sense that modern education right now, these days, it teaches people to focus on being smart. Like, what is the right answer to that test? What is the right essay to write? What is the math? What is how to maximize your scores in SAT? All these things. It teaches people how to get smart, how to get good. But what it doesn't teach is empathy. And I think the biggest thing that matters a lot in terms of being able to collaborate effectively with teams, to be able to lead people, to be able to do things effectively, it has to start with empathy. It has to start with being able to see not just your own perspective, but the other person's perspective. And I think that's the same thing for building teams, the same thing for working with customers and partners. I think all that starts with empathy. And I think that's a big piece of advice, is that education right now is entirely focused on sort of being smart, getting the right answer, but less focused on what is the other person's perspective and how do you communicate in a way that's not just correct, but in a way that's effective, in a way that understands that person's perspective and ultimately gets both of you to a more effective destination. And I think that's the second piece of advice I would have, is that learning how to do that is really important. And I think the only way to do that is by just exercising and trying it, and recognizing that schools and universities won't ever teach you it or won't ever optimize to sort of have you learn that. You need to go figure that out for yourself.
Yeah, well, coming full circle in this interview, and I love what you say that since you are now building with Cresta coaches that coach people to be more effective in their job, does your AI learn empathy? Does your AI help people be have higher levels of empathy?
That's interesting, and that's something that I'm personally very fascinated about. Is that when you coach people, can you help develop empathy? Can you help develop that skill of empathy? And I think you can, because I think just like a human coach, a human mentor can help develop empathy in a student or a peer or in a sort of someone following them. I think the same way software can help coach people to develop those skill sets. And I think there's been a lot of really great work in the 80s and 90s at Stanford, actually, in terms of what is the etiquette of a computer? What do people expect from a computer in terms of their interactions? And it turns out our expectations from a human perspective is we expect a computer to be able to interact with us just like a human would. And like that's ultimately the best experience for us. So if you look at the very best coaches, the very best sort of best coaches and leaders, they're able to develop those skill sets within their people in a way that sort of is effective at sort of teaching them things instead of telling them things. And so I think that's one of the lenses that we really view our coaching and our software under, is how do we help coach people to that behavior instead of telling them what to do. And I think that's an important part of it. But I think that's something for us to sort of shape in the future.
Zed mentioned that I am and was his mentor at Stanford, now at Cresta. And every mentor has a ceiling. One of the most amazing things in life of any mentor is if your mentees break through your own ceiling. And I think that's just happened. Zed is a worldwide leader in artificial intelligence. He's building one of the most amazingly fast-growing company with Cresta, a massive number of new customers just in the last month. And it's very thoughtful in helping us understand AI. I hope you can take from this interview that AI can be your friend. It's a technology like many other technologies, as Zayd said, that can be used for good or bad. But when used for good, it turns people into better people, into stronger people, into better experts, into more competent people. And when people feel that, they will emerge saying, wow, I love having an AI coach helping me being better. And that's all that Cresta is about. And I think that's what AI should be about in the world going forward. Zayd, I want to thank you for this conversation. It's been a great pleasure. And I'm looking forward to many, many great years of future collaboration.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, and likewise.